The midday sun hung high in the sky as 19-year-old Chris Maxwell strolled into the bustling diner on the corner of Elm Street. His designer clothes and confident stride marked him as someone accustomed to luxury, but today, his eyes were fixed on something far more captivating than material wealth. Behind the counter, 18-year-old Tina Johnson, a waitress with a warm smile and a twinkle in her eye, greeted him with a friendly nod. Her apron was stained with coffee, and her hair, tied back in a messy bun, framed her youthful face with a touch of innocence. Chris couldn't tear his gaze away from her, drawn to her effortless charm and genuine demeanor. Despite their differences in upbringing, there was an undeniable spark between them, a connection that transcended social barriers. As the days passed, Chris found himself making excuses to visit the diner more often, each encounter with Tina leaving him more enchanted than the last. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and shared dreams of a future yet to unfold. One sunny afternoon, with a nervous flutter in his heart, Chris finally gathered the courage to ask Tina out on a date. He stumbled over his words, his usually smooth demeanor faltering in the presence of the girl who had captured his heart. To his relief, Tina's eyes lit up with excitement. Her cheeks flushed with a rosy hue as she accepted his invitation. In that moment, amidst the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation, Chris felt a surge of exhilaration unlike anything he had ever experienced before. Their first date was a simple affair, a walk in the park followed by ice cream cones and stolen glances beneath the shade of a towering oak tree. In the golden light of dusk, with the soft breeze caressing their skin, Chris knew he had found something special in Tina, something worth fighting for. Despite the cautionary words of Tina's parents, who warned her to be wary of getting too close to someone from a different world, Tina's heart led her fearlessly into the arms of love. She saw beyond Chris's wealth and privilege, recognizing the genuine warmth and kindness that lay beneath the surface. 3 weeks into their blossoming friendship, Chris found himself unable to contain his feelings any longer. With a mixture of excitement and trepidation, he poured his heart out to Tina, confessing his love and asking her to be his girlfriend. To his immense relief, Tina's answer was a resounding yes, her eyes shining with joy as she wrapped her arms around him in a tight embrace. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of Tina's love, Chris knew that his life would never be the same again. Little did he know, their fateful encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would test the limits of love, loyalty, and forgiveness. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Chris and Tina's relationship blossomed, each moment filled with laughter, shared dreams, and whispered promises of forever. Yet, amidst the blissful haze of young love, a storm was brewing, one that would threaten to tear them apart. It was a crisp autumn evening when Tina mustered the courage to share her secret with Chris. They sat together on a secluded bench in the park, the golden leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, as Tina's heart raced with fear and anticipation. "Chris, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice trembling slightly as she searched his eyes for understanding. Chris, ever the picture of composure, smiled reassuringly and took her hand in his. "You can tell me anything, Tina. I'm here for you, no matter what." With a deep breath, Tina plunged into the depths of her confession. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her words hanging heavy in the air like a weight upon her soul. For a moment, the world stood still as Chris processed the magnitude of her revelation. Shock and disbelief washed over him, his mind reeling with the implications of her words. "Pregnant?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper as he struggled to comprehend the reality of their situation. Tina nodded, tears glistening in her eyes as she awaited his response. But instead of the reassurance she longed for, Chris's reaction was far from what she expected. Denial coursed through his veins like a bitter poison, clouding his judgment and blinding him to the truth. "That's impossible," he declared, his voice tinged with desperation. "It can't be mine." The words hung in the air like a knife, piercing Tina's heart with a pain she could scarcely bear. She pleaded with him, begged him to see reason, but Chris remained steadfast in his denial, his pride standing as an impenetrable barrier between them. Not knowing what to do, Tina summoned the courage to tell her parents about her pregnancy. They were very disappointed in her, but after several days of pleading, Tina's parents forgave her and decided to call Chris on the phone. However, they were shocked when Chris said he's not responsible for Tina's pregnancy. "It's not my problem," he declared, his words cutting through the air like a dagger. "I have nothing to do with this." Tina's heart shattered into a million pieces as she watched the boy she once loved turn his back on her, his indifference a cruel reminder of the betrayal she had endured. Tina's parents decided to pay Chris and his parents a visit. The air hung heavy with tension as Tina stood outside Chris's lavish home, her heart heavy with anguish and betrayal. Her parents stood beside her, their faces etched with concern as they prepared to confront the boy who had shattered their daughter's dreams. With trembling hands, Tina rang the doorbell, the sound echoing through the grand foyer as they waited in nervous anticipation. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing Chris's mother, her expression one of surprise and confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Summoning every ounce of courage within her, Tina stepped forward, her eyes locked with Chris's mother's. "We need to speak with Chris," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging within her. Chris's mother hesitated for a moment before nodding, stepping aside to allow them entry into the opulent mansion. As they made their way through the grand halls, Tina couldn't help but feel out of place, her simple attire standing in stark contrast to the luxury that surrounded her. Finally, they reached the elegant sitting room, where Chris sat with his father, their faces a mask of indifference as they regarded their unexpected guests. "What is this about?" Chris's father asked, his tone cold and clipped. Summoning every ounce of courage within her, Tina took a deep breath and met his gaze head-on. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she watched the color drain from Chris's face. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the sound of Tina's ragged breaths. And then, without warning, Chris spoke, his voice laced with denial and contempt. "That's not my child," he declared, his words a cruel reminder of the betrayal Tina had endured. Anger flared within Tina's chest, her fists clenched at her sides as she struggled to contain her emotions. "You know that's not true," she countered, her voice trembling with fury. "You're the father, Chris. You can't just deny it." But Chris remained unmoved, his resolve unshaken as he turned his back on Tina and her unborn child. Chris's parents stood beside their son, as they believed their son couldn't date a lowlife, let alone get her pregnant. "I would advise you to tell your daughter to tell you the truth about who's responsible for her pregnancy, or better get rid of it, because our son can't be the father of that thing," Chris's mom said, looking at Tina and her parents. Heartbroken and defeated, Tina and her parents left the mansion, their hopes of reconciliation shattered against the cold, unyielding walls of pride and arrogance. Alone in her despair, Tina felt a rage unlike anything she had ever experienced before. In a moment of anguish and despair, she uttered words that would haunt Chris for years to come, a curse born of pain and bitterness, condemning him to a life devoid of the joy of fatherhood. As her words echoed through the halls of Chris's opulent home, a chill descended upon the once warm and inviting atmosphere, leaving an indelible mark on his soul. Despite their disappointment in Chris's actions, Tina's parents showed compassion and forgiveness, embracing their daughter and her unborn child with unwavering love and support. Together, they would weather the storm that lay ahead, their bond stronger than ever in the face of adversity. Even after Tina gave birth to her son, her parents made sure to provide for him in the little way they can. Tina did several jobs to make sure she provides for her baby and also assist her parents. 23 years had passed since the fateful events that forever altered the course of Chris Maxwell's life. Now, a grown man with a family of his own, he found himself facing a crisis unlike any he had ever known. In the dimly lit hospital room, Chris stood by his wife Kelly's side, his heart heavy with worry as he watched her struggle through the pains of labor. For years, they had longed for a child of their own, but their hopes had been dashed time and time again by the cruel hand of fate. Beside him, Chris's parents, their faces etched with concern, exchanged anxious glances as they awaited news of their daughter-in-law's condition. For them, Kelly was more than just a daughter-in-law. She was family, and her suffering cut deep into their hearts. Unable to bear the weight of uncertainty any longer, Chris's father turned to faith, seeking solace in the prayers of a pastor known for his wisdom and compassion. Together, they bowed their heads in solemn prayer, their voices rising in unison as they prayed to God for a solution. In the midst of their fervent prayers, a revelation was revealed. "Brothers and sisters, I have received a revelation from the Lord," he proclaimed, his words echoing through the room with a power that sent shivers down their spines. With bated breath, Chris and his family listened intently as the pastor unveiled the truth behind Kelly's suffering. A curse unleashed by a scorned young woman, abandoned and betrayed by Chris in his youth. Shock and disbelief washed over Chris, his mind reeling as he struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the pastor's words. Could it be possible that the pain and suffering they had endured were the result of his past transgressions coming back to haunt him? As the weight of guilt and regret settled upon his shoulders, Chris felt a surge of determination rising within him. He couldn't change the past, but he could make amends for his mistakes, starting with the woman he had wronged so many years ago. Without a moment's hesitation, Chris and his father set out on a journey of redemption, their hearts filled with a newfound sense of purpose. Their search led them to a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of town, where Tina lived a simple life with her son, Matthew, and her parents. As they approached her doorstep, Chris's heart pounded with nervous anticipation, unsure of what awaited him on the other side. With a deep breath, Chris knocked on the door, his hand trembling slightly as he waited for a response. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing Tina standing before them. Her eyes widened with surprise at the unexpected visitors. "Chris?" she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper as she struggled to comprehend the sight before her. Unable to speak, Chris simply nodded, his throat constricted with emotion as he met Tina's gaze head-on. In that moment, the years melted away, leaving behind the raw ache of unfinished business and unspoken apologies. Before he could utter a word, Tina's son, Matthew, appeared at her side, his eyes filled with curiosity as he regarded the strangers on their doorstep. Sensing the tension in the air, Tina reached out to him, drawing him close with a reassuring embrace. For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the sound of their ragged breaths. And then, Chris fell to his knees before Tina, his words filled with remorse and regret. "Tina, I'm so sorry," he began, his voice thick with emotion as he struggled to find the right words. "I was young and foolish, and I made a terrible mistake. But I've spent years regretting my actions, and I want nothing more than to make things right. I was wrong to deny you and our child. Please forgive me." For a moment, Tina remained silent, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and disbelief. Her eyes softened with compassion as she listened to Chris's confession, her heart heavy with the weight of his remorse. In that moment, she saw the boy she had once loved, his vulnerability laid bare before her as he bared his soul in search of redemption. With a nod, Tina reached out to Chris, her hand trembling slightly as she bridged the gap between them. "I forgive you," she whispered, her voice filled with warmth and understanding. "And I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive yourself. And I hope your son here forgive you." Tears welled in Chris's eyes as he embraced Tina. "Dad," Matthew said for the very first time in years, "what you did is unforgiving, but I forgive you." Chris' heart overflowing with gratitude and relief, hugged and thanked his son Matthew and Tina. In that bittersweet moment, years of pain and resentment melted away, replaced by a newfound sense of peace and reconciliation. Chris felt a weight lift from his shoulders, his soul cleansed of the sins of his past. Few minutes later, his phone rang, his mother's voice trembling with excitement on the other end of the line. "Chris," she cried, her words filled with joy and relief. "Kelly has given birth to a healthy baby boy." Tears of joy streamed down Chris's face as he listened to his mother's words, his heart overflowing with gratitude for the miracle that had unfolded before him. In that moment, as he raced back to the hospital to meet his newborn son, Chris knew that he had been given a second chance at love and redemption, and he vowed to cherish it with all his heart and soul. In the quiet aftermath of his tumultuous journey, Chris Maxwell felt a newfound sense of purpose stirring within him. He knew that it was time to make amends, to seek reconciliation with those he had wronged, and to embrace the lessons learned from his past mistakes. With resolve burning in his heart, Chris extended an invitation to Tina and her parents to visit his home. As they gathered in the cozy living room, tension hung heavy in the air, overshadowed by the weight of past grievances. But Chris was determined to set things right. With sincerity in his voice, he apologized for his actions, his words a balm to Tina's wounded heart. And to his relief, Tina and her parents accepted his apology with grace and forgiveness. Moved by their kindness, Chris's parents also stepped forward, expressing their regret for how rudely they had treated Tina and her family in the past. With tears in their eyes, they asked for forgiveness, their words filled with genuine remorse. Tina's parents, touched by their sincerity, embraced Chris's parents, their hearts heavy with the weight of past misunderstandings. In that moment, a sense of peace washed over the room, healing old wounds and paving the way for a brighter future. As Tina and Kelly, Chris's wife, exchanged grateful glances, a silent understanding passed between them. Despite the pain of the past, they were united in their forgiveness, bound together by the shared experience of love and loss. With a smile, Kelly stepped forward, extending her hand to Tina. "Thank you for forgiving my husband," she said, her voice filled with warmth and sincerity. "You've given us a second chance, and I promise we won't take it for granted." Tina's eyes glistened with tears as she clasped Kelly's hand, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. In that moment, she knew that she had made the right choice to forgive, to let go of the past, and to embrace the promise of a brighter future. As they embraced, Chris felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. He knew that he had been given a second chance at love and redemption, and he vowed to cherish it with all his heart and soul. 2 weeks later, as spring bloomed in all its glory, Tina found herself standing in a sun-dappled garden, surrounded by friends and family. Her heart swelled with happiness as she looked into the eyes of the man she loved, Mark, a single dad she had met at the grocery store, who had captured her heart with his kindness and compassion. With a trembling voice, Mark dropped to one knee, a ring gleaming in his outstretched hand. "Tina, will you marry me?" he asked, his eyes shining with love and devotion. Tears of joy streamed down Tina's face as she nodded and screamed, yes, her heart overflowing with gratitude for the love she had found. In that moment, surrounded by the ones she loved most, Tina felt a sense of peace wash over her, a reminder that no matter what trials life may bring, love will always prevail. What do you think about this story? Leave a comment below this video. Please kindly subscribe, like, and share this video. Thanks for watching.